the news.
Hi, I'm Tessa with Brainrot News with a few bits of news for you to choke on from March 25th. Oh, would you look at that? Donald Trump is making life miserable for international students again, because if there's one thing Republicans hate more than educated Americans, it's educated foreigners who might actually contribute to society. For a brief, shining moment after the pandemic, international student enrollment in the US was bouncing back, but now, thanks to Trump's latest round of immigration paranoia, foreign students are wondering if coming to the US for a degree is worth the risk of being deported for existing wrong. That's the new reality. More deportations, more visa restrictions, and just a hint of fascism with those threats of kicking students out if they so much as attend a political protest. God forbid an international student peacefully voices an opinion while paying tens of thousands of dollars for a degree they could get cheaper elsewhere. And honestly, who can blame them for looking elsewhere? The UK, Canada, and Europe are all just sitting back watching the US self-destruct and saying, oh, you don't want the best and brightest from around the world? Cool, we'll take them. And it's not just about the students. This is terrible for US universities, which rely on international students to keep the whole system from collapsing in on itself. In the last academic year, international students pumped a record $43.8 billion into the US economy and kept 378,000 jobs afloat. You know, the kind of numbers that Republicans usually pretend to care about, except, of course, when those dollars are coming from non-white, non-American sources. But instead of rolling out the red carpet and making higher education in the US attractive to international talent, Trump and his goons are basically putting up a giant neon sign that says, go away, we don't want you. Unless you're a billionaire or willing to work for scraps under an exploitative visa program. Let's not pretend that universities can actually fix this with some reassurance. You think an email that says, don't worry, we support our international students is going to mean anything when ICE is out here treating them like criminals, when even leaving the country for a legitimate family emergency might mean not being allowed back in? The US used to be a dream destination for international students. Now it's a gamble, a very expensive, very stressful gamble. And for what? A diploma that might not even be worth the risk when you can get a world-class education somewhere else that isn't actively trying to ruin your life? So, congrats, America. If Trump gets his way, we're not just losing smart, talented people, we're forcing them to go build their futures elsewhere. Nothing says make America great again like running off the people who actually wanted to be here. Trump and his merry band of bigots are back at it, making life as difficult as possible for transgender and non-binary people. Because banning gender-affirming care wasn't enough, trying to outlaw drag shows wasn't enough, forcing trans kids to out themselves at school wasn't enough. Nope, now they're going after passports, because apparently they won't rest until they've stripped every possible right away from LGBTQ plus people. The new policy strips away the gender X marker for non-binary people. No more ability for trans people to update their passports to reflect their actual gender. Instead, they want to force everyone into the rigid, binary categories of female or male, no matter how incorrect or harmful that is. And they're trying to pass this off as some kind of necessary standardization. Right, because we all know the Republican Party is deeply committed to accuracy and documentation. That's why they keep rewriting history books to make it sound like slavery was a misunderstood internship program. This isn't about clarity or standardization. It's about erasure. It's about making life as miserable as possible for trans and non-binary people, forcing them into situations where they either have to out themselves constantly or risk getting harassed, detained, or worse. Imagine trying to travel and having to explain every single time why your passport doesn't match your identity. Imagine the stress of wondering if some power-tripping customs officer is going to deny you entry or arrest you because your paperwork isn't Trump approved. This is already hurting people. One woman had her passport sent back to her with the wrong gender. Another person is stuck in bureaucratic hell, unable to get any passport updates because of this. This isn't just paperwork. This is people's ability to exist safely in the world. Don't think for a second this stops at passports. This is just another step in the GOP's never-ending mission to roll back LGBTQ plus rights entirely. They've already attacked gender-affirming care. They've already pushed laws to force trans people out of public spaces. And now they're going after basic fundamental documentation. You think they'll stop here? No, because once they normalize this, they'll come for driver's licenses, then birth certificates. Then they'll start reviewing whether trans people should even be recognized under the law at all. They're doing this on purpose. They want trans people to feel unsafe. They want to make travel impossible. They want to push trans people back into the closet or out of the country entirely. This is cruelty as policy. This is an administration that thrives on taking rights away from people just to satisfy its hateful far-right base. So now, trans Americans who already have to fight every single day just to be treated like human beings are being forced to sue their own government just to have a passport that accurately represents them. And that lawsuit, it's not just about travel. That's about whether trans and non-binary people are even allowed to exist in the eyes of the state. Make no mistake, Trump's goal isn't just to change a passport rule. It's to set a legal precedent that says trans people don't count. And once that door is open, they'll keep marching through it until LGBTQ rights in America are nothing but a distant memory. Consumer confidence is tanking for the 4th straight month. What a shocker. Who could have possibly predicted that when you let corporate greed run wild, slap new tariffs on everything, and keep wages stagnant while inflation chews through people's wallets like a starved raccoon, folks might start feeling a little uneasy about the economy. The Conference Board's Consumer Confidence Index just plummeted to 92.9, the lowest it's been since 2021. And the Expectations Index, the part that measures how optimistic people are about their financial future, absolutely nosedive to a 12-year low because, nothing inspires faith in the economy like watching the cost of basic survival go up while your paycheck refuses to. According to the Conference Board's senior economist, optimism about future income has largely vanished. Wow, you don't say. It's almost like people are looking at their rent doubling, groceries costing more than a car payment, and their wages barely budging, and thinking, maybe this isn't sustainable. What are the big realtors saying? Yeah, 2025's looking a little rough, guys. All these giant corporations who normally love to gaslight us into thinking everything's fine are now openly admitting that things aren't fine. Their excuse? Uncertainty because of inflation and new tariffs, which, by the way, are just another tax on regular people that corporations will definitely pass down to consumers while blaming market conditions, instead of their insatiable need for record-breaking profits. Here's the weirdest part. Apparently, there's been an increase in consumers wanting to buy big-ticket items. Why? Because people are worried prices are about to skyrocket even more, so they're panic buying now before everything gets worse. Let me say that again. The economy is so bad that people are willing to drain their savings on expensive purchases out of fear that they won't be able to afford them later. That's not consumer confidence. That's economic doom prepping. Let's not forget, everyone's still bracing for a recession. The percentage of people who think the economy is going to crash within the next year is at a 9-month high, considering the last few months of Republican economic leadership have consisted of whining about gas stoves, trying to defund everything but the military, and handing more tax breaks to billionaires. Yeah, I'd say people have every reason to be concerned. Don't worry, I'm sure the GOP solution to all of this will be very thoughtful and constructive. Maybe they'll ban another book. Maybe they'll rant about how woke banks are the problem. Maybe they'll just tell you to stop eating avocado toast and bootstrap your way into affording a home. Meanwhile, the reality is clear. Wages are too low, prices are too high, corporate greed is out of control, and the people running the economy are either too incompetent or too corrupt to actually fix it. So yeah, consumer confidence is tanking, and unless something actually changes, that trend's going to continue right up until there's nothing left to have confidence in. Republicans and education, name a more destructive duo. You'd think after decades of slashing school budgets, demonizing teachers, and replacing history books with right-wing propaganda, they'd take a breather. But no, now they're going for the final boss battle, federal education funding itself. Their big-brained idea? Block grants, which is just conservative code for let us hoard the money while gutting the programs that it was meant for. Iowa's leading the charge, asking the feds to just dump 10 different school funding programs into a single, unregulated pot of cash. No oversight, no strings attached, just pure, unfiltered Republican greed disguised as state flexibility. This aligns perfectly with Trump's promise to shrink the federal role in education. If there's one thing we've learned, it's that conservatives aren't happy unless they're dismantling something that actually benefits people. They already tried to kill public schools with underfunding, teacher burnout, and private voucher schemes. Now they're coming for the last scraps of federal money that might have helped poor and disabled students, and they want it handed over to Republican-run states like it's a no-question-asked slush fund. Surprise, surprise, Project 2025 has a long-term plan to turn Title I funding into a block grant, and then slowly phase it out over the next decade. The funding that specifically helps poor kids? That one. Just gonna quietly make it disappear, so 10 years from now, no one even remembers that the government used to give a damn about disadvantaged students. Education Secretary Linda McMahon, yes, the WWE lady, because this entire country is a joke, says block grants could be useful, but, we should maybe make sure disabled students still get funding? Wow, Linda, thanks for the insight. You've really captured the bare minimum energy here. Let's talk about these Republican-led states for a second. Florida, Oklahoma, and Iowa are all foaming at the mouth for a chance to manage federal education dollars. Because they've been so responsible with things like healthcare, voting rights, and basic human decency. What could possibly go wrong? This is the equivalent of handing a bunch of arsonists a box of matches and then acting shocked when your house burns down. These states are already slashing school budgets grades, banning books, and running teachers out of the profession. Now they want full control over federal funds so they can funnel it to whatever nonsense they feel like. Probably more charter schools, probably some right-wing indoctrination programs, and probably $0 for anything that actually improves public education. Iowa's plan technically still needs approval, but let's be honest, between conservative packworts and spineless politicians, this could easily slide through. And then say goodbye to any semblance of fair public school funding. This isn't about local control. This is about Republicans dismantling the last safety nets in education so that in the future, the only kids with a decent education are the ones whose parents can afford it. Everyone else, good luck reading at a third grade level while Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott pat themselves on the back for saving taxpayer dollars. If this all goes through, enjoy the new American education system where your kid's curriculum is whatever nonsense is cheapest on Amazon that week, and school funding depends on how much Republicans can siphon off before anyone notices. 147 state lawmakers across 44 states were accused of sexual harassment or misconduct in just 8 years. That's 12 dozen creeps in office, a whole damn gross of them. And yes, I mean that both mathematically and morally. At this point, state legislators aren't so much governing bodies as they are understudies for the Catholic Church. Just replace altar boys with interns and boom, same horrifying abuse of power. Same refusal to actually fix the problem, just with worse suits and even less accountability. Somehow, after years of Me Too, after public outcry, after actual resignations and expulsions, these dudes are still acting like it's 1955. Don't worry, policies have been updated. That's right, in response to nearly 150 lawmakers getting caught being human garbage disposals, state legislatures have taken bold action by redefining harassment, adding mandatory training, and setting up independent investigations, which, let's be real, are just fancy ways of saying, fine, we'll teach these men that no actually means no before we let them run the country. Well, at least we'll try. Yeah, you totally need policy reforms to explain why groping your staff or demanding sexual favors should be off the table when crafting tax laws. That's where we are. So let's talk about this so-called mandatory training for a second. Can you even imagine what it must be like sitting in a room full of sleazy middle-aged men teaching them not to be predators? All right, gentlemen, today's lesson. When a woman says no, that's not a cue for you to start rubbing her shoulders. Meanwhile, women in politics are still dealing with the same toxic, festering hellscape of harassment and misogyny they always have. You know, the same system where credible allegations are met with, well, did she really mean it? Or boys will be boys, until suddenly a man's political career is on the line, and then it's, okay, it's fine, we'll address it. Sure, more women than ever are serving in state legislatures, and that's amazing, but you know what's not amazing? The fact that these women still have to navigate the same minefield of creeps who view them as either secretaries or sex objects, while their male colleagues get away with a slap on the wrist and a half-hearted PR apology. Let's not forget the varying enforcement of these new and improved harassment policies. While some states might actually take them seriously, others are treating them like a suggestion, the same way rich people treat stop signs. At the end of the day, this isn't just about policy, it's about power. And the reason these predators keep getting elected, keep getting away with it, keep staying in office despite their creepy little skeleton-filled closets, is because the system was built to protect them. So sure, keep passing your little ethics reforms, keep hosting your awkward sensitivity trainings, but until we stop electing predators to public office, until we start treating this as a disqualifying career-ending disgrace instead of just another oopsie, we're going to be reading this exact same story in another 8 years. Trump, the man who loves to wrap himself in the flag like a human QVC commercial for cheap patriotism, is once again proving that his support for the troops extends exactly as far as they're useful as props at his rallies. The second they actually need something like healthcare or jobs, suddenly it's budget cutting time, baby. What better way to show appreciation for veterans than by gutting the very institutions meant to support them? The Department of Veteran Affairs is set to eliminate 80,000 jobs. You know, the ones that help veterans get the benefits they were literally promised. And neat fact time, nearly 30% of the federal workforce is made up of veterans, so these cuts are directly screwing over the people Trump and his GOP lapdogs love to claim they support. Outstanding work, fellas. Really top-tier patriotism. Naturally, veterans are mad. Turns out, after serving your country, you don't exactly love being tossed aside like a broken drone the second you're inconvenient. They're showing up to town halls, demanding answers, daring to ask Republicans to do their jobs, which is hilarious, because expecting a Republican lawmaker to actually govern is like expecting a goldfish to compose a symphony. symphony. Take North Carolina veteran Jay Carey, who confronted Rep. Chuck Edwards with a simple yet devastating request: do your job. And Edwards just had to be sitting there sweating through his made in China American flag lapel thin, thinking, damn, I really liked it better when these guys just stood behind me for photos. Of course, some Republicans are defending these cuts, because fiscal responsibility only seems to matter when it's about screwing over the working class. Representative Gus Bilirakis of Florida is out here trying to convince everyone that this is just about being smart with taxpayer money. It's wise financial decision making when you give billionaires tax cuts the size of a small country's GDP, while simultaneously telling disabled veterans, sorry, we just can't afford to help you walk. Not all Republicans are completely heartless. Some of them are just mildly heartless. Take Representative Dan Crenshaw, a veteran himself, who's acknowledging concerns about the indiscriminate nature of layoffs. Wow, Dan, truly brave of you to notice that a giant bureaucratic chainsaw massacre of veteran jobs might not be the best idea. If only there were, I don't know, an entire political party actively working to stop this? Oh wait, there is, and you're not in it. Democrats are introducing actual legislation to stop this train wreck. They're also organizing shadow hearings to make sure the public understands just how badly these cuts are screwing over our veterans. But let's face it, Republicans are hoping no one notices until it's too late. Then there's Vote Vets, an advocacy group that is now laser focused on Republican veterans in swing districts. What's a bigger slap in the face than voting for a party that turns around and kneecaps you? They're running campaigns exposing how Trump and the GOP are leaving veterans to rot, which is the kind of brutal honesty we need more of. So to summarize, Trump and his bootlickers are slashing veteran benefits while still pretending to be their biggest supporters. Veterans are rightfully furious. Democrats are trying to fix it, and Republicans are mostly hoping their voter base is too busy screaming about drag queens to notice. It's time for our next round of the Trump administration's favorite game. How can we make life worse for LGBTQ plus people today? And this time, they're taking a sledgehammer to actual life-saving medical research. The administration has canceled 68 grants across 46 institutions, ripping nearly $40 million out of critical LGBTQ health studies. This isn't some random budget trimming. This is a targeted ideological hit job on research that could literally save lives. And what kind of research are they killing? Oh, just the little stuff. HIV prevention, cancer studies, youth suicide prevention, and even basic bone health. Because why would anyone want to prevent suicides or study life-threatening diseases when you could just, I don't know, ban gender-neutral bathrooms instead? One of the canceled projects at Vanderbilt University was tracking the health of 1,200 LGBTQ individuals over 50 years old. Actual scientific work that might help people live longer, healthier lives. Nope, gotta shut it down, because God forbid we learn something that might benefit the LGBTQ plus community. Of course, the Department of Health and Human Services is pretending that this isn't a big deal. Their spokesperson, Andrew Nixon, insists they're still committed to evidence-based science. Ah yes, evidence-based science, the same way Republicans are committed to democracy, which is to say, only when it serves their agenda. Meanwhile, actual scientists like Simon Rosser are warning that these cuts will set back medical research for years, not just in terms of scientific discovery, but also by gutting the careers of emerging researchers focused on LGBTQ health. The kind of progress we should be encouraging, but instead we're forcing talented scientists to either abandon their research or leave the country to do it somewhere that still values facts. It's not about fiscal responsibility. It's not about reallocating resources. It's about erasing LGBTQ people from public health research. This is about undermining decades of progress in a way that's deliberate, malicious, and deadly. The GOP isn't happy just banning books, censoring history, and making it harder for trans people to exist in public. Now they want to strip away their funding for medical research too. If they can't legislate them out of the existence, they'll just defund the science that helps them survive. And the worst part, if this doesn't get reversed, these cuts will have ripple effects for decades. We won't just be losing this research, we'll be losing all the knowledge, all the medical advancements, and all the lives that could have been saved if these studies had been allowed to continue. Good news, folks! America's infrastructure is no longer on life support, it's just in critical condition. The American Society of Civil Engineers upgraded our infrastructure from a C- in 2021 to a solid C in 2025, meaning we're officially passing, but only if you're grading on the American education systems curve. This minor improvement is largely thanks to the Biden-era investments, specifically the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which ejected much-needed cash into crumbling roads, outdated bridges, and water systems that still think it's 1925. But Like any good thing, the Trump administration is probably eyeing ways to defund, privatize, or turn it into a golf course. The ASCE report warns that despite recent gains, there is still a casual $3.7 trillion funding gap over the next decade. That's right, just a couple war budgets away from fixing potholes and ensuring your drinking water doesn't taste like a lead smoothie. Some areas, like parks and inland waterways, have improved, but roads and drinking water remain in dire need of investment. So while billionaires get private space flights, the average American still gets to dodge crater-sized potholes on the way to work. The ASCE suggests keeping up investment, implementing congestion pricing, and focusing on efficiency to stay competitive globally. But let's be realistic. Under the current administration, we'll probably get a public-private innovation scheme where Jeff Bezos charges us tolls to drive on roads we already paid for. In a shocking turn of events, the US has managed to broker a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia, proving that even a broken empire can still play world police when it feels like it. The agreement, which Ukrainian President Zelensky says will take effect for Ukraine immediately on March 25, 2025, aims to stop attacks on energy facilities and ensure safe navigation in the Black Sea. President Zelensky cautiously welcomed the deal, but made it clear that if Russia so much as sneezes in the wrong direction, he'll be asking Washington for more weapons and sanctions faster than you can say military-industrial complex. The US has assured Kiev that the ceasefire covers not just energy facilities, but also other civilian infrastructure, because when has vaguely defined US foreign policy ever led to misunderstandings? Both Ukraine and Russia have stressed that American guarantees are the only thing keeping this agreement from collapsing, like a Jenga tower in an earthquake. So while this ceasefire is technically a significant diplomatic step, it also relies on the Trump administration's ability to enforce it, which, let's be real, is like asking a toddler to guard a cookie jar. For now, the world holds its breath, hoping this fragile truce holds, but given history and the fact that US profits whether peace or war prevails, don't be surprised if diplomatic success just means brief intermission before the next arms shipment. There is no version of this story that isn't horrifying. There are some stories so gut-wrenching, so beyond comprehension, that even trying to talk about them feels impossible. And yet here we are, again, because what's happening in Gaza isn't just a tragedy, it's a deliberate, calculated nightmare unfolding in real time while the world watches in apathetic silence. Gaza now holds the record for the largest group of child amputees in modern history. Just sit with that for a second. Largest group of child amputees. This is not some abstract statistic. This is thousands of children who were running, playing, dreaming of growing up to be teachers, doctors, and artists, now forced to figure out how to live without limbs, without medical care, without even the slightest assurance that life will get better. Take 5-year-old Sila Ablu Aklan, a child, 5 years old. An Israeli airstrike took her leg over a year ago, and she's one of thousands. There are kids who will never walk again, never hold a pencil the same way again, never play soccer, never hug their siblings the way they used to, because their bodies were shattered before they even had a chance to fully grow into them. There was a ceasefire, some aid got in, just a fraction of what was actually needed. Only 20% of the prosthetics and medical equipment required to help these kids rebuild their lives made it through. And then, in a move so monstrous, it almost defies words, Israel cut off all medical shipments on March 2nd. No more supplies, no more relief, just suffering on top of suffering on top of suffering. And as if that weren't enough, they resumed military operations because apparently the number of child amputees just wasn't high enough yet. Let's be very, very clear. This isn't just about the loss of limbs. This isn't just about the physical agony. This is about psychological devastation. Children in Gaza aren't just losing body parts. They're losing themselves to trauma that no one is coming to save them from. They wake up screaming from nightmares that aren't nightmares at all. They're memories. They flinch at every loud noise because in Gaza, a loud noise isn't just a car backfiring. It's the sound of your home, your family, your entire world being torn apart in an instant. The hospitals that haven't been bombed into oblivion are overwhelmed. The aid groups that haven't been systematically dismantled are struggling to function. Evacuations for medical care are so slow and so limited that it's basically a lottery, one where the prize is a slim chance at survival. If you think the Israeli government doesn't know exactly what it's doing, you are lying to yourself. This isn't just collateral damage. This is a strategy, a methodical, relentless campaign of destruction designed to ensure that even those who survive the bombs never get to truly live again. The world's already moving on. The headlines will fade, the news cycles will shift, politicians will shrug and talk about complex conflicts and both sides, while thousands of mutilated children are left to rot in a place that has been turned into a mass grave in real time. So let's just call this what it is: a war crime, a genocide, a cold, calculated horror show where the victims are 5-year-olds who will never walk again, 7-year-olds who will never draw again, 10-year-olds who will never be children again. The world will pretend this is just another tragic footnote in history unless we refuse to let them. That's all for Brainrot News. Like and subscribe for more updates on humanity's slow motion train wreck.